You want me to be excited or calm? All right.
Turkey. When you're
Ready? Hi, this is Sonali Dev and you're watching Lit with Love. Hello and welcome to Lit with Love. I'm Sonali Dev and this is authorsvoice.net where we bring you live virtual book signings, and today, well, Lit with Love, we bring you virtual live signings with romance authors, and today we have with us Amy Reichert. She just corrected me before we started because I was thinking Rickert. So hi Amy.
Hi Sonali. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. We're going to be discussing Amy's book, The Simplicity of Cider, which is utterly gorgeous, Amy.
Thank you.
And I read this book when it first came out in May.
You think you read it before it because you blurbed it.
Yes, I blurbed it. I'm going to read my blurb out actually. And I said about this book, a comforting and layered read with a cast of well-developed characters who feel both unique and authentic, and a setting that will have you yearning for a trip to Door County and a mug of cider, which we really should have had here today. But
yes, Oversight.
Yes, next time. But it is, so it's this, really lyrically written. So I was saying that I read it a few months ago, and so I kind of reread it yesterday, and I had forgotten how delightful even just that first chapter is. It's just beautiful with these themes about family and loss, and we'll come back and discuss all that. But you want to take us in with a description?
So the story is set in Door County, Wisconsin. And for people who are not familiar with Wisconsin, and hopefully this will show up right in the camera, if this is Wisconsin, Door County is that little thumb that goes out into the water. And it's a huge vacation spot. Lots of apple orchards, cherry orchards. There are no chain restaurants above a certain point. I don't think there are even stoplights. Lots of outdoor recreation. And I really wanted to set a story there. So my main character, Sana, she lives on an apple orchard with her father, Einers, and they've been there. It's been their family for 5 generations. And fast forward to the opening of the book, things aren't going so well. Her dad has decided to hire on some help for the summer. Turns out to be a man and his 10-year-old son and her 11-year-old. I forget how old he is.
10, 11, same thing.
And then her dad gets injured and can't do all the things he normally does. So Sana is forced to rely on this man and his boy a little bit more to help out. A little part of Sana's personality is she doesn't really like other people. So now she's forced to not only spend time with strangers, but she doesn't like people. Now she's got to spend time with this little boy. And it was really fun exploring her softening towards this young boy, because children that age are really special. Boys that age are even more special. And so it was a lot of fun exploring how that all worked out. And then there's some mysterious things that start happening on the orchard. One of the fun things about Sana, I'm not describing this very well right now.
You're doing a great job, but I have to stop you and say that when you say special, you actually mean crazy, right? Because we both have sons, do we?
Yes.
Well, mine just went to college, but still.
Yeah.
No.
Mine is, and this, the young boy in this story, I don't base my characters on real people, but I will say that the boy in this book is very much so my son, and I really wanted to capture how on one half of the day they can be utterly annoying and drive you nuts, and they're just a ball of energy. But at the same time, it gets to be nighttime, and they can be very cuddly and cozy, and they love you. And I really wanted to capture that moment. So there's a lot of little boy-isms in this book, especially a lot of body humor and butt humor. And that fart jokes. That is all my son. He names his butt at one point, as you remember. And my son has actually named his butt. So, and yes, his butt is named Gary. That happens in the book. So yes, that is my son. Anyway, The other aspect of the story, which is why it's called The Simplicity of Cider, is Sana makes hard cider, the alcoholic kind. And she has a special gift where she associates the flavors of the different apple juices with colors. It's a little bit like synesthesia, but a little touch of magic as well, because it only pertains to the apples that are grown on her orchard. And that's kind of how she blends, and she just blends these amazing things. And they've started selling them, but things aren't going very well. And it has put the orchard in debt for her to do that. So there's a lot of different layers, a lot of obstacles they have to overcome. And of course, there's that romantic element with Isaac.
Isaac coming in. Yeah, I wanted to, and you kind of segued into this really well. I was going to talk a little bit about the setting and the depth of setting, but I'm going to step back for a second and let the viewers know what to do with our screen here. We have a little button under us where you can click on to buy books, and we do actually have this beautiful hardcover for sale.
It's gorgeous.
It is truly gorgeous, and it's not readily available elsewhere.
No, it's a special edition.
It's a special edition. It'll come signed by Amy. So click on there. Definitely also send us questions. We have the next half hour, and we'll take your questions. All right, so coming back to the setting, there was just such a depth of understanding in it, and this kind of immersion that you feel as a reader. And so I was just wondering, is it, did you grow up in Door County?
I did not grow up in Door County, but I grew up very close to Door County. Okay. So going back to my map of Wisconsin, which is really handy. Sorry. Horrible, I know. So Door County is here. I grew up like right towards the base in a place called Manitowoc.
In the butt of your thumb.
Yes.
In the crag of your thumb. George, what is your son's butt's name?
Gary.
Gary, sorry. Yes. Gary of your...
Gary. So I was very close. I mean, it was an hour quick trip to get up there. And we would go up there a lot as a child to go apple picking and cherry picking. And even now, I've been up there a few times with my family because it is such a wonderful escape. And it is so beautiful. They have great little bed and breakfasts. And I wanted to really showcase, because it's also a very unique part of Wisconsin. It has a lot of the outdoor elements, but there's also cute little small towns with very iconic restaurants and ice cream shops that have been there for decades. And I really wanted to share that.
And it's a character in the book.
Thank you.
Definitely. And it just, I think, it's when you walk away from books, there's a memory that you take, and there's definitely that sense memory. That and the feeling that I hate beer. I mean, I'm going to say that up front, and
I don't
you
like
can
beer
hate me
either.
about it, but and a lot of people say to me, "This is cider, it's not beer," but it kind of tastes the same to me. And even so, I'm going. This book made me want to try it.
You haven't tried the right ciders.
So we're going out to lunch after this. So
we might have to find something.
So in terms of inspiration, in terms of process. Is that the setting that comes up first? Where did this, what happens generally with all your books, and was this one like everything else?
This book was very special to me. It was a joy to write from start to finish. It was, my first book was I had no idea what I was doing, so I just started writing, and it took me 5 years to get to where it could be published. And then the second book, I started writing thinking, well, I did it with the first one, I can do it the second. And then I realized halfway through I had no idea how a story was put together, and I had to stop and learn. And with this one, I still have a lot to learn, but I felt like I had some of those basics down. So with this particular book, it started with setting, and it started with the idea that I wanted to write about cider, because I really like cider. And it was a good excuse to research how it's made and to do lots of sampling. And I got in the habit of anytime I went to a new grocery store or liquor store, I would buy whatever ciders I had never tried before, which was a lot of fun. And I really enjoyed learning about how it was made and that process. So that's where that started. And then I just was intrigued by the idea of a really tall woman, because I am not really tall. And I wanted to tell the story of this kind of prickly woman who doesn't like people but has this special gift, and she just kind of wants to be left alone, and what happens when she isn't. So it kind of came together, but it does often start with setting for me. And setting all of my stories in Wisconsin is very important to me. So I think I answered that question.
So you segued for me again. I have
thanks.
the best people on here because this seems to happen a lot. There's also this straddling of the line between women's fiction and romance that happens. I mean, they're structurally both. And a lot of people, including myself, are supposed to do it, but I think your book actually does it. There's that wonderful kind of pace of mainstream fiction.
Yes.
And having said that, so I want you to talk a little bit about straddling that line and how that feels to you.
Great question. It's hard, and I don't know how, for people who are watching this, they might not understand the difference between the two. And I'll give you my quick and dirty difference discussion. Romance it's about the two people coming together, and you can have lots of other complications outside of their love, but at the core of the story, that's what matters. And if you took that out, there really wouldn't be much left. Whereas to me, women's fiction focuses more on all of the other stuff, and if there is a romance in it, it could be taken out and you could still have a wonderful story. I could still have Sana's journey in this book without her falling in love with Isaac. Bass could still be there. She could still be challenged to have to deal with those people, but they just wouldn't have the love element. Personally, the reason I like to combine the two is because I really love those first swoons. I love them so much, and that's one of my favorite parts about reading is that anticipation of two characters falling in love. And so even though I like to complicate things and have all of these different issues, I like having that as a component because I like my stories to end well. I like to call my books comfort reads, so when you're done with them, you kind of want to pick them up and hug them.
Yeah, they're very comforting.
They make you feel good.
Yeah, we call that thing you talked about a hardgasm, or rather, I call it.
I love that.
So yes, there are those in here, but I disagree. I think that Isaac and her, but that's just me as a reader. And I think
they have to get together.
and I couldn't just pull that out and enjoy the book. But I think that's the key. Is that's why this swings both ways. Is because if I'm a reader of romance, I can seek out what I'm looking for, and if I'm a reader of women's fiction, I can seek out.
Yes, you can the family drama and the family secrets and all of that.
Yes. And also, when you think of this in terms of a romance, and we see this much more now in romance, but she is such a, for lack of a better word, such a different romance heroine. It's she's lanky, awkward, not comfortable in her skin, yet so comfortable in her awkwardness. It's kind of it's amazing, and he's not you're welcome. He's not your he's not man-chest. He has a man-chest.
He does have a man-chest.
He's not romance novel man-chest.
No.
An unconventionally hot not older man, but
but he is he's in his
30s. They both in their 30s, and so that was, I think, lovely about it, that they're both unconventional, and so where did is that something you specifically wanted to?
I did. In very, very early drafts, she was. This is very typical of how I write my women characters. They always end up being more harsh and more prickly and more unlikable than maybe my editor thinks they should be. So she was, in early drafts, I was really intrigued by the idea of someone who was almost borderline autistic, but very high functioning. So that was sort of where she started initially and evolved, and now there are really no remnants of that left. But I liked that idea of the challenge, and I intentionally made her a non-typical heroine. I wanted somebody tall and gangly and who didn't fit in and has never fit in except for this one place where it is her home, and she feels utterly comfortable on Eden. Their orchard is Eden's orchard, on Eden's orchard. So I intentionally made her something different. and she's one of my favorites. And if people who are familiar with Game of Thrones have, you're not, there is an actress, the actress's name is Gwendolyn Christie, and she plays a character called Brienne of Tarth, and she is tall and kind of prickly, especially when you first meet her in the series. But in real life, she is this charming and delightful woman, and I just was really intrigued by when you see her on the show. She's very unconventional, and even in real life she's unconventional because she's 6'3". She's so tall, but she's just I love that idea that we're just there isn't a specific standard, and I wanted to shake it up a little.
Absolutely, yes.
Plus I wanted to pretend I was tall.
Yeah. And while she is prickly, she's extremely warm on the inside.
Yes.
And there's that whole. I love that you talked about her fitting into this one place, because as an immigrant, when I was reading from that lens, there is this whole theme that runs through the book about growing in a place, of being rooted in a place, and of being replanted. And there's that whole theme that runs through, right? And there's this place in the world where she's comfortable, right? And he's using movement and motion and a nomadic pull to get away from. And her staying in that place has to do with grief a little bit.
Yes,
and his moving has to do with grief a little bit. And that theme was like so interesting to me.
You make me sound like such a smarter writer than I am. I just needed to get Isaac to Door County. You know how it is.
I know. I'm sure it's your smarts are just so ingrained that they just kind of come out on the paper.
I don't even know they're there. That, I really love that, and I clearly must have intended it.
Yes, you did intend it. We'll go with that. But yeah, so the grief layer, because she's carrying this horrible wound, which is an old wound, right?
Very old.
And they are carrying a new wound that kind of makes her be okay with her old, or helps her heal it, right?
Yes, very much. It allows for... especially with Bass, the son, it allows for her to connect with him because they both share a very similar grief. I'm not going to give it away. But it does allow her to make that special connection with him, which I think cracks it open a little bit more and makes her more open to letting the dad in as well. And I think, grief does that. It changes you so much. And it's interesting. I never really thought about it in the way you put it. But what's interesting is my next book even deals with grief on a much more complicated level. So clearly I have some underlying issues I'm working out here.
I mean, love how you laugh while you say that.
It's very sad.
It is so sad. But there is. I mean, definitely in this. And I think a little bit of the secrets, because she has a secret that's been kept from her that's that mirrors almost exactly the secret that's being kept from him.
Yes.
And that's that
that I did on purpose.
So tell us about that.
I read a long time ago that when you're writing a book, no matter what kind of book you're writing, all of your characters have to have secrets. So that's one of the first things. It helps to build tension. So it's one of the first things I always try and work out is maybe not every character is going to have a secret, but I try to work out what everybody's hiding or what lies they're telling themselves. And so that was, and I like parallels. So that is one of the reasons why I chose to have those secrets be very similar. I also am a big fan of touchstone objects. I'm trying to think of like this one, like I'll have the little ring on the table and then it'll spawn a memory about how that ring got there and it'll be little echoes. But did I answer the question? I think I did.
And you also led to another part that was very interesting to me, and that was symbolism, right? With the looms and the, and even just the drafts and all of that. Like, how do you lay that out? And
I wanted to, ultimately at its core, The Simplicity of Cider is a story about being happy. and what happiness looks like. And at the beginning of the story, Sana thinks happiness is being left alone to just be with her trees. And at the end, she has a different definition. And I love, apples and apple trees and land have always had there's a long history of symbolism going back forever, to the Bible with the whole thing. And I loved that that it's a literal interpretation of you have roots here. The looms are trees that were planted by her ancestors. So she has a family connection to them. Then I took it a step further, and there's even that slight magical connection to them. And I loved envisioning that part of the orchard as almost magical. And some of my favorite scenes happen in that part of the orchard. There's a scene at night with little tiny lights in mason jars in a tree that is my favorite.
Beautiful. It almost made me run out. We have a lot of fireflies, right?
Yes.
So it almost made me want to go out and, and when my kids used to want to collect them, I said, no, we're not putting them, what if something happens to them? But that scene was actually made me think maybe I should have let them do it.
Yes, well, you can do it for a short while. And I didn't. What I didn't realize until I was writing that scene, because she does catch fireflies with bass, is because they're from California. He'd never seen fireflies before. I didn't realize that California didn't have fireflies.
I didn't know that.
They don't. There's something about the climate that they don't have them there, and I didn't know that. Thought that was cool. Made it extra special. But so that's that's where, to me, those trees symbolize so much. It's her connection to her family, connection to the land, and I loved. There was so much to play with.
Absolutely, and they're called looms.
They are short for the heirlooms, so I call them the looms. I like to come up with weird nicknames for
so that's
places.
That's an amyism.
That's an amyism.
Okay.
I do like to invent words for my books. That is an amyism, because they represent the heirloom trees. Because
I was wondering what that is.
This was something I learned while researching. Is when the Europeans first started coming here, they drank beer and they drank ale, but they also drank a lot of cider. And so when people hear the folklore of Johnny Appleseed sowing all of the apple trees, those were not like Gala apples or Macintosh apples. Those were cider apples, because people were using those to make cider. And then during the Prohibition, when they could no longer make cider, and that's the only real purpose for a lot of those trees, most of the cider trees, those heirloom trees, got cut down and then replanted with eating apples. So we lost a lot of that. So a lot of the American ciders now are still made with the sweet eating apples, which is why like an American cider and a European cider will taste so differently. Now we're getting more, now people are going back and they're planting those heirloom varieties, and we're getting more of those. So you're getting more complex ciders. I'm really getting sidetracked here.
No, it's all good. This is fascinating. It's fascinating. I see that you really did love your research.
I loved my research.
Your research.
My research. Exactly.
Your trips to Binny's.
Yes. So those heirloom apples are the bitter sweet apples that you would use to make cider.
And in the book, they again are almost characters.
Yes.
So so it's lovely. Kind of the whole question of what is precious in life. And,
Yes.
It was fabulous. We do have
you.
one question
Yay.
please send us questions, but we do have one question, and I think you've kind of addressed this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. This is from Nikki Oshkosh. Is this someone you know?
No,
Hi,
it's
Nikki.
not
Okay.
someone I know. Hi, Nikki and Oshkosh.
I love that coconut cake is set in Milwaukee. Is this one set there too? Go Pack!
Go Pack! Yay! Go Packers! Go Brewers too. We're in the hunt. We swept the Cubs, I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong.
Are you allowed to say that here?
I don't know.
No, you're not allowed to say that.
The Simplicity of Cider is not set in Milwaukee. It is set in Door County, so it's up there. But if you're from Oshkosh, I'm sure you know where that is. But all of my books have been set in the Milwaukee, Wisconsin region. And I'm hoping to continue that, because I think Wisconsin has a lot of places to explore.
So tell us about the next one. What's happening next? I know you just, so congratulations, Amy, because she just handed in her copy edits.
Yes, which is the last, for those who aren't familiar with the publishing process, that's the last big hurdle. There's still proofreading and things that need to happen, but I'm very excited. My next book is called The Optimist's Guide to Letting Go. So while there is no food or drink in the title, my main character is still a gourmet grilled cheese food truck driver and owns that. So there is still a food element. But this story is focusing more, it's in the Milwaukee area, in the Wauwatosa area, which is a little west of downtown Milwaukee. But because she drives her food truck, she's everywhere. But this is more women's fiction than romance. It's about mothers and daughters. You have a woman who's roughly my age, which is about 40-ish, we're going to say. And then her mom, and then her teenage daughter. And her mom is quite the bitch. And you... I did. I didn't know if I'm supposed to full-on curse.
We bleep things out on the show. We talk about bleeping.
I like it. Because sometimes it's dangerous about what might come out of my mouth. So her mom has a stroke, and when the daughter's collecting all the paperwork to go to the hospital, she uncovers a family secret. And her mom, because of the stroke, can't talk. So you have a lot of flashbacks kind of going back to explain why her mom is the way she is, why these secrets were hidden. And it's about the relationship between these 3 generations of women. And ultimately, that our moms are not just moms, they are women. They are complicated, they have pasts, they have dreams, and it's exploring all those elements. But you do get to see some flashbacks that do have some good romance moments, but it's not quite the same as before. So I'm very excited about it. It's a little different, but I've been assured it's still very much me. And lots of cheese.
Wisconsin again. Right?
Yes, definitely Wisconsin.
And when does that come out?
That will be out in May of 2018. Okay. So next May.
And I'll get an ARC before.
You will absolutely get an ARC. No question.
I cannot wait. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I think we have a couple minutes before I lead us out.
Okay.
So you want to tell us what you've been reading and do some recommendations?
I will tell you what I've been reading. Because as soon as I'm finished with copy edits, I go on reading binges. And I just read Today Will Be Different by Maria Semple, which I really, really love Maria Semple. Some people weren't as fond as this most recent book, but I loved it. I love, her main character is not the greatest person, but I love women who are difficult because I want to know why. And there's reasons why. And I think that Maria Semple does a really good job of showing us why her character is behaving the way she is. I read Ready Player One, which is science fiction, and it's coming out as a movie, and it was amazing. That was my Game of Thrones hangover cure, because I needed something that was fast-paced and exciting, and that was great. If you're into science fiction, lots of 80s pop culture references. And then what else did I read? Oh, I read Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. Oh my, was that amazing. So much fun. So it was so good, I immediately went and bought the following 2 so that I can read them.
Yeah, I've only read that first one. I've been meaning
so
to read it. He's hilarious.
Really funny, and I love this just sweeping family drama. Is so complicated, and the characters are so well drawn. I'm really, really enjoying it.
Yeah, intricate, like really intricate. And
really intricate.
There's that very authentic storyteller
yes.
voice that happens. That's very, very Asian. That which I love.
And of course, so different from my world, because not only because it's mostly set in Singapore, but because they are so insanely wealthy. Yeah. Just a very different stratosphere.
Yeah, and a very different Asian story. So
yes.
I love that.
I love it. I thought that was great.
So thank you so much, Amy, for being here.
Me.
This half hour went by too fast.
It did.
But we get to go to lunch and keep talking. So
yes.
There's that. I'm going to take you out with information about upcoming shows. Later today at 3 p.m., Joyce Maynard is going to be here with her memoir, The Best of Us on Stranger Than Fiction. And the next Lit with Love is going to be with Pintip Dunn, who writes fabulous YA fantasies, which are also romances, and that's October 21st at 12 p.m. And the book is called Seize Today. And hopefully we'll see you back then. Thank you again, Amy, and thanks everyone for being here. Bye-bye.
Bye.